Hi kids, so Clemens and me are going to give you a presentation about energy transition. So before we show you our structure about this topic, I decided to start with a citation, or Clemens would rather say quote, of a quite important, known, and really rich person. So this guy said, by speeding the transition to cleaner energy, we can improve the lives of billions of people while also reducing the risk we face from a changing climate. As you can see, it was Michael Bloomberg, and he used to be the former mayor of New York City. But we shouldn't forget the fact that he's rich. Well, after a quotation and some important facts, I'm able now to show you our holy structure. So at the very beginning, I will define the word energy transition in one sentence, and afterwards I will tell you something about its history. My colleague Clemens is ready to take the third part with the headline sectors and the last part recommendations. We might also show you our resources, it's up to Clemens. So let me introduce you guys our definition. Energy transition is a pathway toward transformation of the global energy sector from fossil-based to zero carbon by the second half of this century. My next slide, which is also my last one, is the history. But before, I want to clear up the main energy transitions we've got. These are thermal energy, wind energy, and wave energy. And here comes now the question, what were the primary energy resources? So, for example, thermal energy. This was supplied by wood back then, and the only things they could do with it was cooking, heat their house, or just simply make a fire. They also made use of energies like winds and waves, which they used to grind grains and operate simple machinery. But back then, these kind of options, they were not yet harnessed into industry because they were quite inefficient. That's why we listed 3 historical energy transitions which caused for a change in today's society. The first energy transition happened in Great Britain by mining coal during the Elizabethan era. It was a great alternative for heat, light, mechanical motions, and movements, but it took some centuries till fossil fuels became a universal solution. The second energy transition began in 1859 in Pennsylvania. It is known as a commercial discovery of crude oil. The demand growth was pretty slow at first, but after the First World War, it increased rapidly and displaced coal and other many resources. Even industrialized countries developed high interest on it. OPEC realized the situation and afterwards decided to increase the prices for crude oil. The third energy transition I want to introduce was found in 1882 in New York City. It was the invention of electrical light bulbs and the construction of the Pearl Street power generation station. This transition turned the city from night to day. Electricity became the most important energy form in modern life back then.
According to IRENA's Global Renewables Outlook 2020, 65% of total final energy use will be satisfied by renewables in 2050. 60% of electricity is going to be supplied by solar photovoltaics and wind. The 3 main sectors of the energy transition are transportation, heating and cooling, and the industry. The energy transition in the transportation sector. According to the IEA, the global carbon dioxide emissions in the transportation sector take up almost 1/4 of total global carbon dioxide emissions. There has been a steady increase with around 2% of every year since 2000. According to the WHO, 80% of people in urban areas are exposed to air quality levels exceeding the WHO recommended limits. And these numbers are actually generally worse in developing countries. The demand for transport services like passenger and freight transportation is projected to double between 2005 and 2050. The global vehicle fleet is set to multiply 3- or 4-fold in the next few decades. In 2050, 2/3 of the global vehicle fleet is expected to be in non-OECD countries. OECD stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The governments need to establish a transport sector plan of action. According to the UN, the best principle would be avoid, shift, improve. The avoid plan. Travel demand should be sealed in direct and indirect ways. For example, infrastructure design, like building higher density cities and local integration of workspaces and domestic dwellings. Pricing different forms are also important, including taxes on vehicles, fuels and parking, road use levels, freight handling charges in harbors, and departure and arrival taxation in airports. Shift means stimulating use least energy intensive modes of transport. For example, favorable conditions for pedestrians and bike lanes, strengthening public transport, building bike lanes, transport and carpooling choices through subsidies, and constructing fast-track lanes in congested places. The integration of different transport modes benefits end users and enhances system efficiency. The electrification of both private and urban public transport is needed. Improve. This means increasing energy efficiency of vehicles and motorized two-wheelers by design, engine improvements, efficient air conditioners, and efficient electrical motors. Land and sea freight and aviation, exploring use of modern biofuels, hydrogen or ammonia where electrification is not relevant will be critical. Policies like efficiency norms, fuel standards, vehicle and fuel pricing are also efficient tools to encourage the adoption of more sustainable transport technologies. Now we're talking about the energy transition in the industry sector. The industry sector is also called the hard to abate sector, but there's no real definition of the term. Typically, it means heavy industry like cement and lime, iron and steel, petrochemicals and chemicals, and aluminum, but also road, shipping, and aviation freight transport. Iron and steel alone accounts for 9% of energy and process carbon dioxide emissions in the industry sector, and cement takes up 7%, chemicals and petrochemicals take away 5%. Together, these 7 hard-to-abate sectors account for 38% of energy use in the industry sector. The process emission of the industry sectors are 43% of final energy use by 2050. And these subsections are usually energy intensive, large scale, and very complex. They are often directly linked to infrastructure like energy supply, harbors, and railways. Their production facilities are highly expensive, and these industries are in highly competitive global markets where it is difficult to implement costly procedures for environmental reasons. For example, in the cement industry, there is a problem that more than half of their emissions from cement clinker production are a byproduct of the chemical reaction and cannot be reduced. The most effective way to decrease the emission in the sector would be to decrease the demand and find alternatives. The energy transition in the heating and cooling sector. In the heating and cooling sector, a sustainable energy transition has been lagging, and sector goals are unlikely to be met by 2030. Reducing emissions from current 130 million tons to 72 million tons in the next 11 years will require all available technologies, including insulation, heat pumps, heat networks, decentralized renewable energies. The more efficient a building is, the more realistic any necessary expansion on the generation side will be. As we are finishing off this presentation, we are going to talk about a few recommendations. But they're not coming from us. We only selected them from Agora's Energy Transition Report. The first recommendation would be to invest in physical infrastructure to enable the energy transition, which means updating or an expansion of infrastructure, which is an integral part of the energy transition. Public finance is needed to attract private investments, which are required to create jobs. Mainstream energy policies should be applied into economic, industrial, labor, educational, and social strategies. The policy measures and investments for recovery from COVID-19 must drive a broader structural shift aligned with plans for long-term energy sector transformation. The last recommendation is the development of sustainable transport roadmaps, which is based on the Avoid, Shift, Improve principle. Country-specific plans with urban strategies for all modes of transport, mobility needs, efficiency, and renewable options are desperately needed. These plans should be applied across all regions with solutions such as electrification, sustainable bioenergy, or green hydrogen.